Welcome, everybody, to the Red Letter collaboration with Charlie Sykes. I'm so happy to be sitting down with Charlie, who's one of the most brilliant journalists, thought leaders out there. So thanks for coming on the show. And I'm just returning from Washington. It was quite something. We all saw what happened on the lawn of the Capitol steps, with Epstein victims, speaking out to members in the highest levels of power on Capitol Hill, and they were standing in the lawn below them, asking them to do the right thing, to find just 2 Republican members to vote to compel the Department of Justice to release the Epstein files. Although I don't know about you, Charlie, but even with that vote, do you think that the Department of Justice would even do it?
Oh, who knows? I mean, we have that James O'Keefe video out that suggests that they would simply redact the names of the Republicans. But you know what? Let's just take a step back from the
Yeah,
politics because you have made this point, I think, very eloquently that we're talking about a crime scene, and
yeah.
that we sometimes lose up when we talk about the various political maneuvering. I mean, reading your coverage of this, it really did strike me that this was a pivotal week in the entire Epstein story, with all of those survivors, all of those victims coming out and speaking. Many of them we had not heard from before, and obviously they're getting strength and encouragements from one another. And I was interested in what you said. You said you wanted to go there to feel the moment, to take it all in, why this moment matters, and what was left unsaid. So we just talk about that. I mean, the
Yeah.
what the moment said to me was this is absolutely not going to go away if the victims and the survivors are out there saying we want to tell our story, and we are pushing Congress to release those files. So that seemed to me to be a major, irreversible development in this story. Your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think so. I think they were establishing their ground, strength in
Yeah.
number. This is the thing a lot of people don't understand. You saw younger victims come out, girls who showed up on Epstein's steps at 12, 13, 14 years old, okay? Usually, people say, "Oh, a lot of these victims, they were in their later teens, early 20s." And those are the ones who come out because, the brain is different um,
Yeah.
when you're sexually assaulted at an older age. It's easier to process. It's easier to move forward through therapy and with help. Your entire frontal lobe is affected from this kind of sexual trauma. And I think when it happens to you when you're younger, it's even a deeper it's harder to move on from it. There's a deeper level of shame. A lot of them are just like, I want to forget about it. Some of them have disassociated from the entire situation. They didn't want to get involved in the cases. They were ashamed of themselves. They were unable to, even to this day, reclaim their identity, their self-worth, their ability to say their own names as survivors. And I think the older women that come out there, they were still far too young, and being trafficked and groomed at any age is a terrible thing. But they gave the strength to the younger ones. And I think that's why you're seeing more and more speak out. I mean, some of them said, I never said anything before, but I started working for him when I was 13, 14. Like Courtney Wild showed up at his house with braces on her teeth. And so seeing about 3 dozen survivors coming out, that's the most I think I've ever seen come out before.
And there were a couple of interesting things you said, I heard you talking with Terry Moran about all of this. A couple of things that I think were kind of surprising. Some of the survivors actually really did think that Donald Trump was going to help them. They
Yeah.
actually believed that Donald Trump was going to do what he said. You had people like Elon Musk and others saying we're going to release those files. This was a big thing. So given the fact that Donald Trump and the Republicans are doubling down on this is all a Democratic hoax, that was interesting to hear people say, we are Republicans and we actually trusted you at one point.
Yeah, no, they were. And that was something I noticed too. A lot of them were just seeing Epstein arrested in 2019. They thought to themselves, during Trump's administration, they were like, oh, this is good. We're getting our justice, right? They again believed through the MAGA influencers, through Trump himself, that if he was elected, that he would be the one to release the files, and that they would get justice through him. And I spoke to one of them off after the event, Haley Robson. She was like, "I'm a card carrying Republican, but I'm not voting anymore." She's like, she also isn't a Democrat, obviously, but they're from Florida. They're from Palm Beach County. I think it was Democrat, but now it's Republican. But like, these are like the kids of working class people. Traditionally Republican, and Virginia Giuffre, who I was very close with, also believed that President Trump would release the files. Elon Musk personally promised her over DM that he would release the files. So they had a lot of hopes. I mean, that was a big part of his campaign promises. And I don't think that they were naive to hope that. There was very little movement on the case except for, the Ghislaine Maxwell trials
Yeah.
under Joe Biden. We can't discount that. But I felt that, they thought, okay. And the truth is that Jeffrey Epstein spent a lot of time with Democratic politicians.
A
He
lot.
did. Yeah, and he
He
donated
was
to a lot.
connected.
Yeah. He spent he and they saw that too. I mean, so that I would have the same, you know, presumption as well. Like, I would think that that you would expect more from this administration, but yeah, that you did mention the James O'Keefe report, and it's a tricky thing with him, right? Like, he goes undercover and he does these sting operations and he catches people saying things off guard. But this was he at the deputy DOJ level?
Something
This
like
guy?
that. Yeah.
Yeah,
He
he
was,
was
was reasonably high up.
right, and he was telling a woman that he met on a Tinder. So he uses thing about James O'Keefe, he likes the honey pot, right? He likes
Yeah.
to lure men in, and he found this. They basically got this pretty high ranking DOJ official, not high ranking, but high enough to go on a date with this girl and admit under the guise of a date that he believed that whatever would come out about the Epstein's files, um, Republicans would be protected, and that you would only see Democrats looking bad, which
Yeah.
is just
And their damage control is kind of weak. Like, hey, I had no idea that this was an undercover. I never would have said these things. So, leaving that aside, because I would take everything from James O'Keefe with a gigantic grain of salt.
right.
I want to just go back to this event because something else that you said that was interesting. That the role that Marjorie Taylor Greene is playing in all of this. You see some of the people who were the hardest hardcore Trump supporting MAGA supporters, and they were out there. Not all of them. A lot of them, were in the tall grass. But talk to me a little bit about your reaction to Marjorie Taylor Greene, because I mean, the last time that I checked in on her, she's talking about Jewish space lasers, another crazy shit like that. But you actually thought that she was lucid and rather forceful in arguing for transparency for the survivors and the victims.
Yeah, I mean, she brought exactly. It was very bizarre to see her there next to Ro Khanna, who, I think people have a good deal of respect for him. He's obviously an ambitious politician, wants to run for president, represents some of the yeah, he represents Silicon Valley. He's a smart guy. One of, some of those people in Silicon Valley were most likely tied up with Epstein in some way or another as well. And seeing her there and just remind everyone, I thought she probably did it the best, that this was a crime scene and that it's not a partisan question. This is just, these are women who have crime victims' rights, and you should do the right thing. These are just
Mhm.
people. And this isn't a no-brainer. This isn't a hoax. She went on Eric Bolling's show. I'm not sure which network he's on anymore. I just maybe it was Newsmax or and but he was fired from Fox News for allegations of sexual misconduct. And he was telling her it's a hoax, and she's like, "It's not a hoax. The guy went to prison. It's not a hoax. Like, this is a real thing." And I think when people actually they want to say, "Oh, there's nothing there," and I really challenge them to you know what. If you think there's nothing there, I'd be happy to talk to you and tell you everything I know. But when somebody has a recommendation of 65 charges of sex trafficking from a deputy U.S. attorney and it goes down to 0, you can't tell me there's nothing there. After that, the U.S.
Yeah.
attorney goes off campus and meets with Ken Starr and Jay Lefkowitz. You cannot tell me there's nothing there when the case goes all the way up to the Attorney General of the United States, and then is kicked down to the state level for a ankle monitor and 13 months in a county jail with work release, in which, as we heard on the steps, and something that I had heard before as well, that he had actually abused one of the girls while he was detained, like, while he was serving time.
What a, what a surprise. Well,
Yeah.
she's also escalating this. At the same time, you have the White House, and we could talk about this in just a moment. I mean, the White House is really doubling down on this opposition to transparency, really putting pressure on members of Congress to cast what strikes me as a really ugly vote not to release all of these documents. And Marjorie Taylor Greene is saying that, okay, if the victims, survivors compile a list of good, with the clients or whatever you want to say, the regular associate, I will read that list on the floor of the House under the constitutional protection of the privileges that a member of Congress has. If the victims did it, could be sued for defamation, but she would be immunized for doing it. That strikes me as a significant escalation of her defiance of the White House at a time when the White House is making it absolutely clear that they have no tolerance for any Republican that votes for this, that signs that discharge petition.
Yeah, they called it a hostile act against the administration.
Yeah.
Those are some serious words. Now,
Yes.
how does she get floor time? I guess she can just use her floor time when she's in
Yeah.
the any floor time she wants to do this. Um, that would be a very powerful act. I get so frustrated, Charlie, I have to tell you this, when people write to me or say to the victims, name names, um, because, we obviously know a lot about this case. Problem is, and we've seen this, is that and Virginia Giuffre probably suffered from this the most, and she ended up taking her life, and I think a lot of people forget that a handful of survivors have taken their lives.
Yeah.
This is a real story. This isn't a hoax.
Never
People don't
forget
take
that.
their lives about over this. And there's so many women who are just disappeared, never came, just don't want to talk about it. The FBI's own estimate is 1,000 victims. The FBI doesn't overestimate these kind of things. Um, it was a large sex trafficking operation out in the open, and name names. Do you know what that's like? I mean, I've heard the thing that after Lisa Phillips, the survivor who said, "Us victims are gonna name names." Afterwards, I spent time with the survivors. We went and had dinners together. We toasted to Virginia and to, her life, and because she was really the first one to come out and really tell her story openly without fear of retribution. Um, she was afraid, but she did it anyway because she believed that victims refuse silence. She created a nonprofit about that. She eventually, got the throne. The only settlement, the only civil settlement the monarchy has ever paid has been to Virginia Giuffre. And they think that she is a hero for refusing silence, but they are afraid she has been drowned. She has been just she was dragged through the mud in this process.
Mhm.
She was sued for defamation. She spent years and years in court. She has had to endure way more than anyone should have to endure. Not to mention that she has lived a really difficult life of sexual slavery under Epstein, and um, it was a really tolling. And I just don't think for so many of these women, it took so much for them to wake up in the morning, to put on their clothes, to stand there, and for the first time, many of them Jane Does and say, "This is my name. This is who I am." And yeah, this is me. And then you want them to have to go into defamation trials against the most powerful men in the world, okay? And this is one of the fears that even journalists have. They've been bullied, they've
Sure.
been intimidated.
Hmm.
Sometimes having this information is a terrifying thing to have. And for the families, for the victims, um, Anushka DeGiorgio, she went up there and she said, "I'm followed on my way to drop my daughter off at school. I am harassed." We know that private investigators are used. Even Michael Cohen said on my podcast that when President Trump was accused by a Jane Doe in the Epstein trials, he sent a private investigator out to find out who she was. The point is that people are Jane Does to keep anonymity, but like there is so much going on behind the scenes, and they said that they're terrified that Lisa would even say that she's putting a list together.
Well, and
They are
these are
not
very
backing that.
powerful, wealthy people. I mean, these are powerful, wealthy people who have the ability to really break the survivors if they speak out. I mean, they can afford the lawyers, they can afford the private
And
investigators.
it could break the lawyers representing these
Mm.
victims. David Boies was sued as well in the case with Alan Dershowitz and Virginia Giuffre. It's not that's why the lawyers are even hesitant to talk about it. They too know that they can be dragged through the mud. And these are people who have millions and millions and millions of millions and
Right.
millions of dollars to waste on these kind of cases.
And are used to being in court. So I want to talk about a story that you broke over the last couple of days before we get back to Donald Trump, because this is kind of a heartbreaking story. And I'll let you tell it. It's one of the Epstein survivors confronts a Republican congressman that she met on the airplane. This would be Harriet Hageman. Is that how you pronounce the
Yeah.
name? Yeah,
Yeah.
from Wyoming, the woman who replaced Liz Cheney in Congress. So one of the survivors waiting to board a flight from Washington to Chicago recognizes or connects with Congressman Hageman. And so tell me the story, because it is kind of heartbreaking.
It is. It's really, really heartbreaking. So, Marika Chartouni is a survivor of Jeffrey Epstein. We got to know each other through the Broken Jeffrey Epstein podcast, which I all recommend you listen to. I worked on it very closely with Virginia Giuffre and Marika and others like Courtney Wild. I traveled around the country with them as they tried to pursue their own justice. It was a story. It was a story very much focused on them rather than on the sexy crimes of Jeffrey Epstein, right? If that's what you want to call them, but. Um, Marika and I have remained friends and throughout the years, and, I she said to me, "This woman is staring at me for a long time." I said, "Oh, weird." She goes, "I think she's a congresswoman, I think I recognize her." Marika's a very bright woman, and I was like, "Oh, that's weird." And she must have recognized her from the from from all of the,
Hmm.
events over the past few days, and Marika's been on TV. Marika's a striking woman. She's blonde, she's tall, she was a model. Um, and I saw like, "Oh, that's weird." She's like, "I think she's a congresswoman." And I was like, I didn't know what to say to her. We're just texting. I was like, "Oh."
You're
Then
texting
she made a
in
picture
real
and she goes,
time where this is
yeah,
happening.
in
This
real
is
time. I was
playing
like,
out.
she goes, "Oh, it's Harriet Hageman." I was like,
Yeah.
Marika, she's a Republican. She's a woman. Why don't you talk to her? Like, you came down to Washington to try to get those 2 extra votes because Massey only needs 5
Right.
Republicans
Right.
to
The
help
math is important here.
5 to get that discharge petition, to get this vote on the floor so that Republican members would have to vote against releasing the Epstein files. It's the vote. Get them on the record, right? So, um, so far, you have Lauren Boebert, a motley crew, Nancy Mace, and you have Marjorie Taylor Greene. 3 women, who are with Massey on this. And they just need 2 more. So in my mind, I'm like, well, she's a woman, like, who knows? This could happen. It's not crazy. It's not like you're walking up to
Yeah.
a man. And she's a little, some people say she looks like a witch. She looks a little funky. She's from Wyoming. They're very populous there. And she just took out Liz Cheney, right? Who was she was the slayer of the GOP establishment. Who knows? Maybe she would be willing to be a firebrand in all this. So I said, why don't you go talk to her? And she wanted to anyway. So it wasn't even like I needed to like say
Mhm.
anything. But when she just didn't have the context of who Harriet Hageman was, and I explained to her who she was. And she walks up to her and she's a very timid woman. And she just texts me back, "I did it." She said yes. I'm crying. And I was like, whoa. She just said yes, like she's gonna vote with Massey. That would be huge. Like that
Big.
could cause the dominoes to fall. And and Marika's crying. I called her and she was like, "Oh my god." She said, "Yes. Oh my god." She thought she made history. Like she thought she made history. It was like a beautiful moment. And
Yeah.
I was like, "Wow." And she's like, I have to board. I'm gonna text everybody in our group chain because all of the survivor sisters and the lawyers are all in a group chain. They call each other survivor sisters because
Yeah.
that keeps them like bounded together. So um she she boards her flight and I I start like looking online and I look at Harriet and then I said, "Well, what happened? Tell me." And we
Yeah.
talked very quickly. She said she voted and she said, and I said, "Tell me exactly what she told you." She said she asked me where I lived, what my name was. And she told me everything would be okay. And she said, "I voted for it." And I said, "What do you mean she voted for it?" She said, "I voted for it yesterday." And I was like,
Oh,
"Oh God. Oh no." And I was like,
justice system.
"Marika, because then I was like, she didn't vote for it yesterday. She voted for this measure, a countermeasure that would continue the probe in the hands of the House Oversight Committee, which, by the way, all of the documents that they're getting are black, 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 dizzying black lines of nothingness.
Yeah. They kind of
And
look like this. Yeah.
oh my God, Charlie, thank you for pulling that up because
Yeah.
it it is
So
terrifying.
much for transparency. Yeah.
Right. It's disgusting. I'm like happy that you have a printer, because people need to see that. We should that is terrible. And so I was like, "No, it's not right." And she tried to look for her. She couldn't find her on the flight. She was in the front of the plane, and Marika was in the back. But even before she boarded her plane, she walked up to her aide and was like, "Thank you so much. Thank you so much." Like the heartbreak. And for me to have to explain it to her, and I was like, "It's not going to work." And I was like, "Why didn't you just go walk up to her on the plane and ask her, like, what did you mean by that you voted for it?"
Yeah.
Like, and she was just like, I think she was so heartbroken by it, and I think that
Yeah.
was all she could do. And she couldn't find her, she said, so it was like, at that point, it was what it was, and then
Do you think that Hegeman knew that she was misleading this survivor? Do you think that she knew that she was doing the sleight of hand?
I think
Was
so,
she?
yeah.
Yeah.
I do. It's like,
That's the way they
when
are.
someone asks, "Can you vote for this?" Like, I voted for it. Like, you're not asking about the past, you're asking about the present, the one that they were out there behind a plaque that was the Massey bill, not a
Yeah.
countermeasure.
The
That they
reliance on
were
the
there.
gaslighting.
She's not a she said to me, she's like, "This is legalese." That's what she said to me. And I was
Yeah.
like, "Exactly." And we are used to getting that. We're journalists. We're used to getting spun up by politicians, right? But they should not be doing that to crime victims.
To their face. Yes.
It was
But
despicable.
this is the strategy though of Mike Johnson, right? It is to kind of gaslight everybody and say that there's no need to sign the discharge petition because it's moot. What are the survivors thinking about the way that Speaker Johnson is handling this, claiming that he is coming to their defense, that he is for transparency, when in fact it is this bizarre shell game that we're seeing.
It's patronizing.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
I'm protecting the innocent. It's like, "Hey there, little lady. I'm looking after you." And it's like, "Excuse me?" They're like protecting us. We're outside here saying, "Release the files." And there is a very my answer had to this has always been, well, you were able to prosecute and indict Ghislaine Maxwell with some of the women remaining Jane Does. You can continue to do that. You can protect the victims. You can conceal their identities, and as you have in the past. But there's no reason you can't release the files without protecting innocent victims. That's not really a justifiable reason unless you think the innocent are the men. And if that's the case, then that you've answered your question. There were he spent some time with the victims, and one of the lawyers, Sigrid McCauley, she's a powerhouse attorney from Boyes, Schiller, Flexner. They were the ones that decided to go up against Prince Andrew. They represented Virginia Giuffre, and she told them, when you get these files, you are going to see very powerful people in those files. What are you going to do about it? And they said, we won't let the victims down this time. What does that mean?
Mm.
You know?
Okay, so yeah. Well, I want to get to that because there's something that you said to Terry Moran that I wanted to ask you about. But of course, you've seen by now that Donald Trump is doing more rants on Truth Social. This one came out about 9 o'clock this morning. Once again, he's saying that the whole thing is a hoax. This is merely another Democratic hoax, just like Russia, 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 and all the others, in order to deflect and distract from the great success of a Republican president. The now dying Epstein case was only brought back to life by the radical left Democrats because they are doing so poorly, sort of ignoring the role that his own administration played with this, the bomb from Elon Musk. But what did the survivor sisters say about Donald Trump repeatedly describing this as a hoax?
It's incredibly upsetting. They're like, I'm not a hoax. I'm a real person. This is not a hoax. This is not a hoax. Um, but I am in awe of their grace because I think I'd be furious if I were them. Um, to try to quiet people who are victims of sexual assault. But They are way more elegant and graceful than I am. I do think that they are so much more focused on what they want, which is having the files released, that they know that he's in charge. I mean, you heard them making these impassioned pleas saying like, "You have the power right now, Mr. President, use it right now." And they don't want to anger him because they don't want to be seen as adversaries to him because they truly want these out there. This isn't some sort of political game for them. Maybe political games for some people, like political consultants out there that think this is great for the midterms. Not for them. It was like uh, Playbook, and I read it every morning. I'm sure you do too. I used to
Sure.
write for Playbook at Politico, and they were like, "Yes, what has long been bandied about as a political warfare is now a crime scene." I'm like, "It's always been a crime
Yeah,
scene." You know what I mean? But
not all
it
horses.
was like, for them, this isn't about politics. And so they don't wanna tangle with the most powerful person in the world for the sheer sake of it. They don't care who wins the midterms or, who has the House seats and who can do this or who can do that. They're just like, if we have to if we have to suck up to this powerful autocratic, person, who cares who it is? They just want to know they just want what they want. They want justice. And I think, like,
Okay,
they're not
so
pawns in a political game. I just wanna make that clear. They're not pawns.
and then they're not partisan actors. So this is what does not add up in the whole story. Which is, and I raised this question the other day. What is in those files that is so damaging that Donald Trump is willing to spend so much political capital on it and willing to force Republicans to take this really ugly vote against transparency? And of course, obviously in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, what is in there about Donald Trump? You listening to your conversation though and realizing that the Epstein cover up has gone on for decades now, multiple administrations of both parties. This guy is so connected. You use the term that releasing the files opens up a Pandora's box,
Yeah,
that there are so many powerful names. And you floated out the idea that this could actually affect the financial titans of America, the actual economy. That
yeah,
and also it seems obvious, at least based on your reporting, that that Jeffrey Epstein was very, very deeply connected with law enforcement agencies, as an
yeah,
informant with intelligence agencies. And
mhm,
so there's a lot going on there that so many people, including now Donald Trump, is are willing to cover this up. I mean, what happens when you open that Pandora's box? What's in there,
yeah.
do you think?
No, I think you're right. The problem is that it will obviously erode trust in whatever trust is left in the Department of Justice.
Mhm.
Um, that's huge. I think you'll see how involved he was with them, going all the way back to the first Ponzi scheme that he was involved in, Financial Towers, when it was the largest Ponzi scheme at the time, $400 million with Stephen Hoffenberg. He was an informant. That was his partner. He didn't go to jail. Stephen Hoffenberg spent the rest of his time in prison. I believe that's when Jeffrey Epstein first became acquainted with the justice system and how to use it for his
But Donald
advantage.
Trump doesn't care about that, right? I mean, why would Trump care about discrediting the Department of Justice? This is not a priority for him, right? So what
Mm,
else is in there?
yeah,
Is it the intelligence agencies? Is it the foreign intelligence agencies? Is it Trump himself? I mean,
I think
there's
he
something
also
in
worked foreign intelligence agencies as a
there.
hyper fixer. I think Trump himself was a very good friend of Jeffrey Epstein's at the height of his sex trafficking operation.
Yeah.
We know that lawyers even called Trump at least Brad Edwards told me that he had called Trump and used him as a source. I can't imagine if you if I was doing an investigation on you, Charlie, do you think at any point your best friend wouldn't be involved
Yeah.
in some way?
Hmm. Yeah.
I mean, he belongs to the clubs. He's in the black book. He's flown on the flights. I think even if there is no direct connection between Trump and sexual assault, which we don't have any proof of besides we don't have proof. There was a woman who alleged that she dropped it based on intimidation right before the election, right?
Right. Right.
But regardless, I don't see how, if there was a true investigation, he wouldn't be named. Mo- he wouldn't be named, or people who are donors. I mean, listen, these are very wealthy, powerful people. someone I thought that I think Massey said that this is all about the uh the donor class too. And it would take down a lot of donors. It would, Jess Stanley from Chase Bank, he was the head of Chase Bank, he had to step down. There were email exchanges between him and Jeffrey Epstein discussing which type of girl he would like, Snow White or Beauty and the Beast. Uh, you know, from the head of Apollo, Mark Rowan, he had to step down. So it's like the Les Wexner. These are really powerful men, and so many of them still have not been revealed. It would cause a lot of chaos. And
Y-
so many of them are connected to, and not just that, there are dignitaries, world leaders, there are politicians. It goes far and wide. And for even those who may not have been a part of the sexual abuse, it's also the impression of like, wait, you were around and enabled this person
You
because you
saw
can't
it.
do anything about it.
If you were on the Lolita Express, the airplane, you saw a lot of things, and you'd have to be pretty obtuse not to see. You used a very interesting phrase when you talked to Terry Moran. We talked about, grooming the young girls, to become sex slaves. But also you described the what you called the grooming of the elite,
Yeah.
the way that Jeffrey Epstein would, fly these elite figures around around the country on airplanes with scantily clad young women as stewardesses, grooming them to think that this was acceptable behavior.
While I was in DC, I did learn something new, which I had already known but heard more about from other survivors, that a lot of the worst, most depraved activity happened on those planes. And, when I was traveling with Virginia Giuffre, I remember a moment when we passed by the Palm Beach airport, and that's where Epstein's plane was still parked when we were driving, because this was in 2020. And I saw her body physically go like this and revolt, and she became ill afterwards, and frankly, we couldn't do any more reporting for the rest of the trip. She went back to Australia shortly after that, and she described, um, being assaulted by a world leader, on there, and, no longer a world leader now, but was then, and, in a way that was brutal. I mean, it was brutal because that was the type of sex this person wanted. They were used in ways that I don't to even talk about it is really, really, really difficult because, um, yeah, it was really, really dehumanizing, and I don't
Let
think
me ask,
people understand how brutal some of this was.
are we going to find out? I mean, are we going to learn the truth? I mean, no, this is a question you can't answer, but I guess the reason I'm asking this question is, okay, it is the first week in September now. And the big question was, would this story go away over the summer? Would it come back? Obviously, it is back in a very, very big way. It has not gone away. There's clearly momentum. The survivors are speaking out. What do you think? Are we going to get those documents and or find out the truth? I mean, there's obviously, the possibility that documents will be released will be so redacted as to be unusable. What do you think is going to happen?
I don't think we'll ever get the truth from the Justice Department, unfortunately. I think it's gonna be whistleblowers. I think it's gonna be survivors. I think it's gonna be journalists. I think, although so many journalists are intimidated when they're doing this story, and so many families, so many survivors, I mean, the intimidation behind this story is horrible. And that's why I think the fear factor of the story makes it, why it's, but I really don't believe that you can keep this genie in the bottle forever. Like, I think it eventually has to come out. Um, I think about Virginia because so many of the people that we know about and so much of the story that we know is in Virginia, was told to Virginia, and she has her memoir coming out soon,
Hmm.
October 21st. And, she's no longer alive. It'll be interesting to see how much of it the publishers went with in terms of the naming of the names, because they then, I think in her death, they take on the risk, defamation.
Yeah, you have to
I
lawyer
want
up.
to correct that Stephen Rosenweg, Virginia was murdered. It's not true. I was with her brother, 2 nights ago. I spoke to Virginia, just months before she died, and her brother told me a horrible story about what it was like to try to, bring her back to life for 45 minutes um, until um, paramedics came, and he couldn't. He was working on a dead body. She had taken her life in her bathroom, so that's not true. She was not killed, and, I spoke to her before she died, months before, and she was not well, and I said she should see her family. People underestimate the impact of these. I'm not gonna say how she died. It's not relevant, but she was not killed. She even wrote a note saying, "If I am no longer alive, I want this book to be published anyway." And I think we need to really understand the impact, the real human impact of these crimes. Stop sensationalizing it with these conspiracy theories.
No, I think that the reality is horrible enough without without indulging in any sort of those lurid conspiracy theories. Tara, thank you so much for this conversation. And I want to urge all of my subscribers to subscribe to the Red Letter because your reporting has been invaluable. And also I think what's important is that you bring a passion for the victims and for finding out what's happened here. And obviously have tremendous sourcing and contacts with the people who know what the truth is. So I would strongly urge all of my subscribers, all of the viewers, to subscribe to what you're doing. You're doing great work, Tara, and this was
Thank you, Charlie,
really
and I
great.
appreciate yeah, and I appreciate you staying on this story as well because I know it's not the typical political story that we cover from day to day, which is what I was doing before this came back to light. But when Pam Bondi said case closed, uh, my gut dropped, and I was like, "What?" And I was on vacation actually, and I kind of dropped vacation to get on it. I just landed 'cause that's when they do it, right? July 4th, right when we're all taking off for the first time. And I very strangely the week before was on a podcast with Joanna Coles from the Daily Beast, and I said to her, "I've been in touch with my contacts in the Justice Department. They say they're still working on this case." And that was what kind of kept me hopeful too, is that they were still working on it. But when that happened, it was like, no, 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 no. We have to show the world this case isn't closed. This is not the case.
It is definitely not closed. So
Yeah.
thanks for
Okay.
today. I appreciate it very
Thank you,
much.
Charlie. Okay. Thanks. Bye.